Hello, world. Welcome to another episode of the Deep Dive with Eyal Shai. My guest today is Maja Apolonia Rodé. Hi, Maja.
Hello. So great to be here with you, Eyal.
It's really good to have you here, and thanks for coming on. Today, we're just going to open with a rhyme. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. This is called The Sculptor and the Stone. One day, a sculptor all alone took a chisel to a stone, and with one movement of her hand, a world of time and space began. She chiseled here and chiseled there, and soon a universe appeared. She gave it color, she gave it sound, she gave it up and gave it down. She gave it hills and gave it trees. She gave it stars and galaxies. She gave it creatures of all sizes and all sorts of fun surprises like eyes and ears and hands and feet, like soft and warm and cold and heat, like earth and water, air and fire. She gave and did not tire. And then she gave it you and me and all things through eternity. And she rejoiced, for she was glad to give it everything she had. Yet there was something still to give, the one thing that could make it live. And in the moment when she knew it, she breathed all of herself into it. Some say the sculptor is no more. There's nowhere you can find her. Others say she's everywhere and nothing is behind her. You'll find opinions everywhere, but the answer's in your heart. You've always known the sculptor of this living work of art. And some would say, through speculation, she disappeared in her creation. Still, others see, and so can you, perceive directly what is true. That everything, in whole or part, is itself the sculptor's heart. In every inch and every mile, every frown and every smile, in every shape and every sound, that's where the sculptor can be found. In all the feelings, all the sights, throughout your days and darkest nights. In every one of every race, you behold the sculptor's face. And when they all look back at you, they behold the sculptor too. You are the hills, the stars, the trees, and endless possibilities, like birds that fly and fish that swim and oceans that they swim within. Just look, and you will see it's true. Everything's announcing you. Listen. You can hear the call of it echoing, echoing. You are all of it.
Thank you so much. Being here and listening to it is something special. Um, Recordings of this can be found, but I just experienced it in real time. So thank you very much for it. Such a lovely poem, I think, that is, yeah, just brings a sense of serenity and peace, I think, to one's mind and whole body, and also really resonates with some of the stuff that I've been talking with people about in the last days, which is the dual nature. I don't want to say dual nature, but the perspective that matters so much when we look at us. Is it us? Are we, completely one with another thing, or are we separate? And I think that's something that I find there interesting. This exploration and the question about that. So I'd like to hear from you a little bit about the origins of this rhyme and um, yeah, maybe the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, gosh, that's a beautiful question. I haven't thought about the origin story of this origin story for a while. Um, it started coming when I was sitting on silent retreats with a teacher named Adyashanti that I spent many years with. And the the line um, that, let's see, I forget which line came first, but there was a sense of contemplating the nature of what is God. And I was feeling into my own experience and knowing that, let's say, the divine feminine was so integral that there was necessarily a balance if we're going to put a gender on a creator. And and one of the lines from the poem came to mind as the sort of core of the rhyme, which often my poems do that. And then as I was in silence on retreat, it grew from that. And I think that part of what I was feeling inspired in the rhyme was to honor every bit of existence in in a field where sometimes, let's say on a silent retreat that has quote unquote non-dual teachings, it can be easy to get like caught in the emptiness and feel like pure consciousness is all there is and all that matters. And that deep love of the heart that cares about every little thing in the world, that there was that deeply loving creator. I think actually, as I'm talking it out, that's the origin, was the coming together of that realization that I had when I was a teenager about unconditional love and how deeply important and vital that was to my own path. And then to marry that with that sense of being it all and coming sort of prior to existence, that what is it when that love meets that consciousness. And I think that's what gave life to this poem.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I think it's special, the poem, in the sense that it brings together the creation story of Abrahamic religions, in the sense that there is definitely a creator that's extraneous to the world in the beginning, but then because it's within the power of an omnipotent creator, she also decides to coalesce into her own creation, and then we move on to something that's more Eastern, I think, in origin. And it's an interesting way of looking at it, because this is also something that for us humans is confusing. So this self that can trouble us so much, I feel like having it kind of fighting to make it the right kind of self that we want, or trying to maybe make it go away through some sort of ego death or something like that. And it seems that we don't yet have a conception of having a real healthy self, as in we want to transcend and maybe say goodbye to that self. And recently I've been thinking about how, if you've actually transcended yourself in the sense that you've found your place in something that's bigger than you, right? You could still be looked at the level of the individual, and you could still be recognized, but you would be put in a beautiful composition where you are fitting, and around you are going to be other things in this world. And so you are going to be recognized as a distinct self, but you are going to be well fitted with everything and therefore beautiful. And that is something that this poem, yeah, gives rise to when it interacts with my mind. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a point apart from that to make, but I wonder how that strikes you.
Yeah, I love your reflections on this poem. That might be my favorite articulation I've heard so far. Um, hmm. Yeah, it seems like a paradox, doesn't it? That one could be the individual and the whole at the same time. But when we are in our center, as let's say the center of that individual, that center is the same center of the whole. Like the quote from Meister Eckhart comes, I believe it's God is a circle whose center is everywhere and circumference nowhere.
Hmm.
So when we come into our center, another quote that comes is, be still and know that I am God. And that I am isn't some God saying out there, know that I am God. But when
Right.
you're in the stillness, you know I am God, right? And yeah, and what is it to be alive as you, as the individual, which, whether we know it or not, we are that creator living as us, whether we have that no self experience or not. We can't get rid of the actuality that life is breathed into us, as the poem
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah. Definitely. Um, yeah. I've also been wondering since hearing it for the first time, um, if you could share if anything comes to mind in terms of some applications, in the sense that if you carry this poem within you and have it as a source of reference, it and the things that the understanding that it kind of helped you arrive at, um, what would be times in life where you apply this principle, and what kind of effect does it cause?
Mm, that's a great question. what comes to mind is not exactly an answer to your question, but I remember sharing this poem with a few people at the Science and Non-Duality conference in a small group there that was just having a conversation on the side. And some of the people in that circle were more of the like stuck in emptiness consciousness. And there was something about sharing this poem that I feel touched something in them that did care and love. Like if that love is present in someone's heart, I feel like they can only be stuck in emptiness for so long, is kind of how it feels. And it's in all of us anyway. But so then to apply that, let's say, to if I was doing my own practice, I would say, when do I recall this poem myself? If I feel disconnected from myself and the world, I'm realizing that, I could, and I have done in the past, like sometimes because I know when I recite it myself, I elicit that feeling in myself and it brings me back into my center, and it feels soothing. It feels soothing to the parts that don't feel connected. I guess that's what it is. Whether it's disconnected out of like stuck in consciousness. But why do we even get stuck in consciousness? Because there's some kind of pain. There's some kind of thing that didn't get held when it needed to, or something that longs for that deep love of mother kind of thing. And so to reconnect with that in myself as, let's say, a tender human that wants to get back into balance, and at the same time realize my true center, and how that is not, well, I was going to say not hurt by what happens in the world, but that's not at all true. It feels the pain of the world, but there's this compassion that I get to hold myself in. That's what comes up when I hear your beautiful question.
Yeah, it is. I like it that it's not about running away from feeling anything difficult or anything like that, but rather a recognition and a place you can go to be at peace with that, and realize that this is part of everything. Yeah, it's interesting. Like for me, I would think that something like that would come to me, or the poem, or my takeaway from it would come when I'm dealing with people, right? And understanding that there could be disconnect there. I've always been very, very sensitive to disharmony between people, like extremely so. I can be sensitive about a number of things, but this is number one. If I feel rejected, if I feel misunderstood, if I feel um, wrongly judged or anything like that, it hurts so much. And then if I'm thinking about something like that, it could very well soothe me by saying, this is, yeah, not really me that's being grilled here. Um, but really it's an interaction of the whole world with a part of the world with itself. And yes, there's maybe disharmony there, but it's very local, and there is something bigger than me that still does it work. And I can work to have the kind of influence that I can have on, and not worry about what happens outside of me. um, yeah, I think that's what it kind of makes me feel. And yeah, like I said, like the healing property of this poem is so evident, I think, and it's also the delivery, obviously. It's the tenderness and the metric. Yeah, what is another place that that this takes you to?
Just put that back to me because I had the question in my mind. So you said it's healing. So what is your visceral, or can you say more about the healing quality and how does that, what's the phenomenon in almost of that?
Oh, the phenomenon of healing. This is this is great. I've been thinking so much about healing recently, mainly because of trying to think more and more about states and move things from states to processes, and this includes health. And in a sense, today I feel like there is really no health because there is no one state that you can look at and say that's a state of health. It could always be in between unhealthy states or extreme states or anything like that. And actually, to judge whether an organism is healthy, you need to follow it through time. And then it's a process, not a state. So, in a sense, recently I've been feeling that we're always healing, that really the healing never stops. And of course, we're going to lose in the end if it comes down to, you know, our individual bodies. We're going to lose, but it's a constant process of not losing to entropy, right? And I'm going to say that for me, healing is gaining an understanding at a level high enough so as to really grasp it, hold something, and knowing that it's not going away, and then something clicks because information that was before um, kind of made up of different things becomes compressed into one concept that I know is not fleeting, and therefore I won't have to expend energy in the future to hold it together, and therefore my struggle is going to be lessened, and my struggle is going to be um, a lot less painful. And in a sense, that is a type of deeper healing, you know, knowing that I won't have to do that again. In a sense, I can move on to healing other things. So I know it's unconventional, and I hope it's clear enough. But that's healing to me, feeling that something is a bit more harmonious than it was the moment before, with a preference for things that I know are going to stay harmonious for a bit longer than usual.
Wow, I'm so glad I asked. That's beautiful. Yeah, and as you were talking, I was also pondering then that that maybe an element that leads to that harmonization, and I like that word, as even the way sounds harmonize and they come into resonance, that it's about somehow relating things in a way that works well for sort of everyone, or the parts that are connecting, and that sense of connectedness, I think, in the poem is the deepest healing for me, is to heal that feeling of being cut off from nature, or cut off from life, or feeling separate from whatever we might say, comes prior to creation. And yeah, so that healing of the separation. And I like then another way of saying that would be coming into harmony. Like, oh, we are of the same song.
Yeah, harmony is, yeah, it's up there with my favorite words. I mean, literally, it means to fit together. Harmonizo in Greek is to fit together, um, and it's we know it from music, but it's really kind of fitting together in even a prosaic sense in its archaic meanings. So even fitting together boards to make a floor, but it really doesn't matter. I think that ultimately, if we sit with it and we get in touch with what our soul really desires the most, it's harmony. This is the basic, the foundational thing which our soul desires, and this is when it feels good, when there is harmony. And it explains so much, so I don't know how much in detail to go, but I think even the things that we chase that end up harming us, things like pleasures that people chase and become addicted to, something that we have to recognize that pleasure has its own internal harmony. This is why we seek it. We evolved to feel this visceral harmony in certain things that allows us to keep the species going. Um, but once we get to a point where we live in a world of abundance, we need to recognize that this type of harmony, the visceral harmony, is not necessarily conducive to living well, because we have the capability to be creative and to be rational, to come up with types of harmony that are more sustainable, that are going to be there longer term, where we don't have to suffer the roller coaster of coming down from the Olympus of pleasure down to the dumps of the valleys of pain or of disconnect. And yeah, so harmony is such a central concept for me, and it's something that all the time working in my own mind to come up with conceptions that um, amplify the harmony, and so to make sure that in my mind, if I'm working to reach some sort of harmony, it's not going to take away from any other harmony which I've already established. And then step by step, I think we can get to a place where we experience more and more harmony with during our life.
It's so fun hearing you reflect on things. No wonder you have a podcast of deep dialogues. Um, yeah, harmony. Gosh, what a number of things come to mind. Uh, one is a little. I'll start with. I have a round that came a song like a canon that repeats, and it works as a round, and the words of it are: listen to the silent song of everything you see. This is you shining through the ever-present harmony. Listen to the silent song of everything you see. This is you shining through the ever-present harmony.
Whoa, yeah, yeah. It's there's something about circularity, right? In Gödel, Escher, Bach, the famous Douglas Hofstadter book points out, that there is just a strange loop is something which is enabled by self-awareness, and it's just a theme that goes through our lives, and it's just maybe the most interesting kind of property of our mind, that it's able to do these circular things. And maybe because you said it's a canon, that's also reminiscent of the book, because he talks about Bach's crab canon, which is an amazing piece. I recommend everybody to give it a listen. Um, but yeah, this looking back, right, and recognizing you in something, and then realizing that if you're seeing you, then who does the seeing, and things like that. That's always trippy.
That's funny. Yeah, and another thing that really came strongly, it's interesting that you're talking about the way you're talking about things right now, because it's been recent for me to this idea of the fractal nature of self, and how, sort of like I described, being in the center, we get to be the center of this precious human, and we also, that's not separate from the center of life, and then all the fractal layers in between, like, what is the sense of self that, like, the cells of my body have, or what is the sense of self that my family has, or what is the sense of self that a country has, or that humanity has, or the universe has, and all the different layers of that. And so what I've been sort of contemplating recently is like self-love, and what is a self-loving act. I mean, my whole inquiry in recent weeks has been around self-love, but particularly in that sense that self isn't limited to just me as a person, that myself is fractal into the tiniest things and the biggest non-thing. And so a truly self-loving act, which I would use harmony, a harmonized act of myself, would be resonant on all the fractal scales, ideally in full alignment fractally with my whole self. And that includes you, and it includes, let's say, the past and the future. So if I think about that movement toward an addictive behavior that feels good right now, maybe to my body, because my body's in pain, and not that I don't drink, but let's say my body's in pain and I want to have a drink. That is harmony. It feels good in the moment to my body.
Mm-hmm.
But when I extend my sense of self out more, what feels better? It's like if I extend myself out a little, if I am able to have a larger feeling of my life self and the future self that's gonna have a hard time because I drank again or something. It's like that the more that I can develop a greater sense of what it is to be, then other things become pleasurable. Then pleasure can be, feeling the tears finally coming that I couldn't feel, that I was hiding with the drink. And not that the drink is bad, but then the pleasure becomes the healing of a greater self, maybe. That's what comes to mind when you talked about what you talked about.
Yeah, the different levels of us, to me, in my life, that just as you say, I think for most of us, it's kind of strange to think of what would it feel like to be part of a superorganism that is well, that enjoys good health over time. And if all we know how to feel is kind of what qualia feel to us on this level of the individual, we realize that it's going to feel something different because we're not going to be on the same level of the individual. But so I'm trying to think what it must feel like for a single cell, like you say, in our body, because there's probably some part of our cells that still remembers what it's like to be a unicellular creature. But even if not, that's not the point. I think that being part of a greater whole that's doing well, it has to feel good. Maybe in a much gentler way than we're used to, but it's also a matter of what kind of range we're used to. So I think we're used to living in a place where the highs are highs and the lows are lows. Uh, but there's something about living a life that's just more on the Tibetan plateau, where everything is good. That is, you can be there and learn to appreciate that you're up high on a plateau, and kind of let go of some of the big dips and of the high peaks, because knowing that the chasing itself involves a lot of wanting and clinging, and getting to a peak almost certainly means that you're going to go into a deep crevice next. um, yeah, so I think thinking long term, thinking big about a superorganism or something bigger than that is a big help of going through life without experiencing really terrible places. And being healthy is just, it feels very different from feeling pleasure, but it's, yeah, I guess it's still ineffable to be honest, but it's very, very good. I can say that.
Yeah. Gosh, again, a number of things come up. One, I guess what I want to reflect is you said, what would it feel like to live in something like an organism, a larger organism that's healthy, and how that would, yeah, my sense is, oh, wow, yeah, that would be good. It's like to live in the ecology of a thing where flows of energy and gifts and letting go all happen naturally in that ecology. But on a sort of different level of, or a different angle on a conversation right now, is that sense of, and I'll ask you, let's say, your opinion. I have this theory that feels really true to me, and I'm curious what your experience or sense is, which is like, I got, oh, the most, like, if we're talking about affirmations, let's say, and wanting to affirm something into being, that the most powerful affirmation is, what would it feel like if whatever, that we
Mm.
elicit in our being, that visceral sense of what it would feel like to live in a harmonious organism, or whatever the thing. And then as we elicit that feeling in ourselves, it's that, actually, that feeling that brings it to life. That's my theory. What do you think?
Yeah, I really, really like it, because um, I think just as it would be very very useful to put into practice while thinking about the things that you think that are the type of things that we've been discussing right now, like long-term well-being and things like that. I think it's extremely applicable when it comes to the things that I think we tend to want growing up in a Western society. So something like money or status or the new thing, because a lot of the time when the want is disembodied, like you say, you can just generally call this thing good and then tell yourself, why would I not want a good thing to happen to me? But I think when you do this exercise which you just outlined, I think that for me, very instinctively, the kind of emotion or feeling that comes along when I'm thinking about any of the things which, from time to time I'm prone to wanting. So I'm not excluding myself there, but I think the feeling that rises is a kind of a buzz associated with an ego trip, with um, something that's very exciting, but also very obviously unsustainable. And and that's the problem with these things, right? That it's completely unsustainable in the sense that you're immediately going to want more. And if I apply it to health, which is what I've learned in my life, is really all we could hope for in this life, is to be healthy for as long as possible and to be capable of healing for as long as possible and with the most efficiency. Um, then the sense that I get is that of harmony that is carried long term, that is absolutely not kind of has no reason to end, right? Because why would you be healthy and then not healthy? Like, things are going to come out from the outside, but you have it in you to heal, and then the harmony keeps going on. So I really like this exercise. It reminds me of the exercise of, I think that, for example, with Coke or something like that, there was a with not the drug but Coca-Cola. Um, when I was young, there was a period where I kept a bottle of Coca-Cola. I told my mom to keep it in the fridge, and I really liked the stuff. And I think at some point I read about people who are just basically saying, it's like, next time when you drink it, really pay attention to what's going on. And it turns out that you can like something until you actually pay attention. And then you're like, this is such a weird drink that's black, that has like 6 teaspoons of sugar in a can, and it's like way too much. And then you suddenly feel that you've been enjoying it, but in the least aware way possible. And it changes something. Yeah, and indeed, I have no desire to drink Coke now. So this is what it reminds me of.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, there's something about seeing what's actually happening. Just the seeing is makes so much difference. I want to quiz you a little more. Uh, so what I'm feeling is like the realizing, oh, my thing about the calling in through that sense of what would it feel like, that actually, oh, that's a creative act to elicit that feeling and call forth that resonant frequency from the world. And then you talked about healing. You used some sentence that made me just think, oh, and here you're doing this podcast. Is this part of your being a healing presence in the world? And this is of your creation. You're making this podcast. You're the creator of it. And so I just want to quiz you a little bit about your experience of being creator and being healer at the same time.
Yeah, thank you, for for asking me this. It feels good. Um, yeah, first of all, I'd like to think that I'm managing to do well, generally. So that is good unto myself and good unto others by making this podcast. And I think that, to go back to the poem, or but really to any creation story, we call it creation story, and I think a lot of the time we're very much thinking about the metaphysics, about the figure, whether it be God or whatever that created the thing, and kind of lose the sense that um, there is creation in there, and that creating something is special. It's very special to be creating and to be creative. So creativity, the act of I don't want to say relating to disparate things and being able to hold them in one mind, and then whether you're going to realize this in the sense that you're going to make it come into being and creating, or even if it's just putting two things together and seeing what comes up. There is something so inherently pleasurable, and I've mentioned it on different podcasts, but I'm gonna say it again because it's so important. Creativity and being creative is the only sustainable act that's of creating, of getting pleasure. Basically, it's the only sustainable, pleasurable thing. And the reason is that anything, any kind of pleasure that comes about from extraneous thing, um, they're going to be novel one time, two times, three times. But for anything like that, there's going to be tolerance built built up. Whereas when we do the novel thing, there is no tolerance to build, to creativity. It's by definition novel, introduces novelty into our lives. So I think when we talk about the creation story, we have to think about not we have to think about us not just as things that were created, but also take it as a story where we can put ourselves in the shoes of the creator and become a creator, and realize that we can make as much pleasure for ourselves through creating without sacrificing anything, without feeling down afterwards, because we can just create another thing. There's no dip, there's no there's no depletion. So that is it for me. That's the importance of creativity, both in the sense of novel understanding and novel production, or bringing something into the world.
Wow. I've never thought about it that way. That's beautiful. And it comes back to somehow self, like that creativity is self-generated pleasure, and yourself is always there. It's always there. It's not going to go somewhere. You're always with yourself. And so you always have that hit of the drug right there, ready for you. And it doesn't deplete you. Well, the act of creation, think of birthing a child, like that's not sustainable to be in the birth moment forever. But so there is a risk, I think, in creating, but it's always that self-generativity feels really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if there is any risk, it's probably if you get it, and that's the thing that you're chasing. Um, I suppose that living in a society that doesn't necessarily reward people who create and doesn't necessarily support them, then I guess you could kind of grind yourself to the ground doing it if you are so caught up in this process of creating. Then maybe you might lose your survival instinct even. So I think yeah, that could be a danger, which is also the onus of solving it is also on the society, because we should appreciate artists very much and learn from them. Um, yeah, so there is a risk, I suppose.
Yeah, I think when I said there's a risk, what was I meaning? Well, just that it can take all of you. Like a mother, there's a risk in childbirth for the mother to die because it takes every ounce of her capacity to bring that creation into being. And so, yeah, I guess it's kind of back to what you said. Also,
Hmm.
does the do we live in a world that supports creativity? What would it feel like if we lived in a society that cultivated everyone's healing creative gifts?
Yeah, I just tweeted today, I think, about how I see people who feed cats. At least in Israel, I think they're in every culture, but people who are kind of marginalized, who are are less than widely appreciated in their community. I'm talking about the community in which I live in, and a lot of these people find their salvation in taking care of somebody else, and a lot of the times it's the stray cats outside. So making sure they have water, making sure they have food, and I see this as a symptom of in a culture that doesn't know how to appreciate people, with a wish to heal, to care for others, and instead they're just marginalized, and that's how they're kind of fulfilling their potential in some way. But I think in a healthier society, I think these people are recognized as healers, and they are they are given a place to be part of society. Not that they're not going to take care of cats, but they're not going to be marginalized. And so I'm just saying this to see that I definitely see symptoms of how we're not there yet. I see it in many other things, but that's just one novel thought that I had today. Novel for me. Um, yeah, I'm gonna go back to harmony. I think that hearing a harmony that again is changing, because it's being made by a creative force, either the individual or a society made up of individuals who have transcended themselves to create a well superorganism. The harmony is never going to stop and never going to get old, because it's going to be creative, and that's how I view it, as a completely sustainable, yeah, source of well-being. What are some other ways, in terms of day-to-day life, or some examples that you can think of that are related to this sense of not feeling disconnected and, yeah, disjunct from the rest of the people? Do use anything else to get to that point, to cultivate that compassion and love? Are there any other tools that we should be looking at?
Yeah, it just keeps coming back to self and love. And yeah, it's a little bit like I'm just on that groove right now to know that too. Where I'm at right now is really realizing how much in the past something in me was taught to hate myself. And the little ways and the big ways that comes into play. And these days, making the conscious choice when I feel and recognize something as like, oh, that even literally like, oh, that pain in my arm right now, I know is caused because I'm having some kind of self-critical thought, and it's sort of like a contraction. I can feel those subtle things. And it's like, oh, that contraction in my arm is self-hatred embodied right now. So let me consciously like release that energy, not just tolerate the pain in my arm, but like in a way psychically, like take that almost like a shackle. There's a shackle and I have a key and I'm unlocking it like with my mind's eye and letting that go. And moments like that where it's just like making the self-loving choice, even on just that subtle level. And that then that extends into like, it's not different from your Coke can story or bottle. It's like, is this, when I see what's actually happening, does it resonate for me? I mean, that's just another way of saying, is it self-loving to drink this bottle of Coke? Let me see what it is to drink this. And oh, actually, that doesn't feel good. And yeah, just to bring more and more awareness to that. And why does that matter? Is because then the more I do that for myself, I mean, it sounds like things people have heard a million times, but it's like I create in my own sort of auric field this sense of caring. And so then that has the potential to extend out into, I'm just showing up as a more caring person, like slowly but surely being kinder to my mom, for example, where I felt disharmony or something. But then when I'm showing up as my own harmonized version of myself, then I can be more kind and compassionate with her. And that feels really good. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what comes up.
No, it does, and I think at least in the circles I'm part of, it's like borderline cliche at this point because it's such a widely read book. But you know, the title of Bessel van der Kolk's book, "The Body Keeps the Score," and knowing that it is the case, and it's almost a cheat code for finding disharmonies that still need to be resolved. It's just a really good way to do that by getting in touch with our bodies again and finding the kinks that need to be straightened out, for sure. Because you brought up kind of generational pain, and that's also something that I've been thinking about lately. I'm just going to ask you something about your intuition of it, but I have been struggling to make up my mind. Maybe struggling is not the way. Struggling, but I've had a hard time making up my mind about whether we are generally at a low point in history where there is a lot of generational trauma that people have suffered, and it's development of, let's say, the last centuries or thousands of years? Or actually, are we in a place that's better than ever before, where there is actually awareness to these things for the first time in history, where the healing is accelerated? And I just wonder what you think. Do you think, like, people, let's say 15,000 years ago, were they free of trauma because they were more naturally in tune with their bodies, or was there more trauma just because their reality around them was more violent? I find it like a hard question to answer. I'm wondering what you think.
Yeah, it's an interesting intuition experiment, right? Um, my sense, if I put myself back then, is that there was probably less enculturated ideas of right and wrong behavior. And so the same way, and maybe in that book you mentioned, I forget if he talks about, like, when an animal in the wild goes through a trauma, they shake it off, right? Like
Yeah,
they
that's more Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine, but yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
and so they shake off that trauma in the moment. And in our world, we're not allowed to be weird like that, right? It's not normal. But just like an animal, humans as animals, more in touch, I would say, with our animal nature years and years ago, because we didn't have the culture is also has evolved and built upon itself over the years. And so we are living in a very different culture than we could have possibly lived in before, because culture is made over time.
Hmm.
So I feel like it must have been very different. And I find it really interesting, and I've experimented with this about, that humans are born premature because the birth canal is smaller, and we, get out before we can even think to walk, like a baby horse would in a few minutes or
Hmm.
whatever. And that allows us to have this capacity to adjust to whatever environment we're born into, because our brains are still developing and all that. And so it makes us very malleable as babies to live in whichever environment. And so even our great 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 ancestors also were premature. And so to me, that premature birth is like an inherent trauma. Like, the perfect parents are never going to be able to catch every moment perfectly and make sure that a developing baby isn't going to have some kind of trauma happen in some way. And I guess I just don't see that as possible. And so it feels like it's built into the human system. And the thought experiment that I had a while back was, why did we do that? Why did we decide to walk standing up when the price was so high to be born premature? And okay, so I got the idea from Daniel Schmachtenberger that because we're born early, that makes us adaptable. But the theory I came up with was that it freed up our hands, and our hands are the extension of our creativity. That it
Mm.
was that capacity to be creative that made it worth evolving the way we did, to have our hands be our tools.
Yeah, yeah, I really like it. Yeah, there were definitely a series of evolutionary steps that made us diverge from the rest of the animal kingdom. Um, yeah, I think it's widely accepted that having opposable thumbs and walking upright is just something that uh, made the range of things we can create so large, and our brain had the freedom basically to think about what to do. So I really like this thought for sure. Yeah, I'd like for us to, like, one last time maybe reflect on the whole theme of the conversation and thinking about creation, creativity, harmony, and maybe you have one last reflection on how to kind of relate it to living well one last time for our listeners.
Mm. Well, what comes to mind is to share a simple, but I feel very sort of fundamental DNA kind of level practice. It's just how I've seen it work, and yeah. So I was looking at my creative process years ago, and looking at deconstructing how it is that I do what I do creatively. And one element in that sort of, it wasn't a model, it was more like just trying to describe what happens. And what happens in a process of creativity where something magic happens. And like, I want to draw this drawing as a healing gift for my friend who's sick. So how do I just make a drawing that's healing? Like, I don't know how to do that. Like, that's magic. If it does have this healing quality, how does that happen? And so a key element of that happening, as I've thought about it, it's sort of honed into a very simple 3-part thing, which is align, ask, and act. Align, ask, and act. And it's circle that just keeps continuing. And so the align would be, we could say, get into resonant harmony with whatever it is that calls you to express it in harmony. Maybe it's just get in harmony with yourself. Tune into the feeling of what beauty is. Align with whatever the healing source of life is. So to come into harmony, resonance, align, that's the first thing. And then from the place of alignment, ask, what next? Okay, here I am in my resonant self on the fractal layers that include the whole and myself and all the parts. What next? And then in the mandala drawing process that I have a video we could link to, what next is simple. It's like, should I put a line or a squiggle, or, just what is the next shape I put into the mandala? Say, what next? And then accept the answer. Okay, I got it. From this sense of resonant space, I asked the question, the answer came, and then to do it, to actually put it on the paper, to actually figure out how to take the action to bring that to life. And then after the action, there's that acknowledgement, there's the appreciation, and then alignment again. So align, ask, act. And if any of those things are missing, then I'll use the word healing doesn't happen. If I'm not either, I don't have to stop and align and stop and ask, but as I'm getting the hang of it, or if I ever lose balance, coming back to that 3-part process gets me back into that flow, right? And so if I'm not aligned, then it's action that's not doing good. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
not asking, then I might not do it the most intelligent way. If I'm not doing it, then it's not helping anything. It's disempowered. So each of those is important. And so that's what I leave with, that align, ask, and act.
I love it. I love it. And to me, intuitively, it goes to the, um, let's say, what usually they'd be called four cardinal virtues in ancient Greece, but they're also processes. They're also active. They're also activities, and these would be um, wisdom, justice, persistence, I would say, and temperance. So doing things in an orderly way, and I think it all kind of maps onto this thing, which you just say. So a line would be knowing good from bad and understanding it within the context of a situation, and that would be wisdom. You would have ask, which is kind of looking at the orderly way of doing things in order, and that would be temperance. Um, you would have acting, which I think would be kind of an act of justice, because you are trying to benefit actively, and then persisting throughout the whole thing. So um, I don't know. That's what came to my mind, and I really like this model for sure. Yeah, Maya, this has been amazing, and it's the deep dive, but some dives are even deeper. So I'm definitely happy that we got to these depths or heights, whatever they are. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I want to thank you. I am glad that I asked you a few questions and got to learn so much from you in this time together, and feeling also that sense of appreciation for whoever has listened to our conversation. And thank you for bringing your heartful presence into the world.
Yeah, you're welcome. Before we go, would you like to tell listeners about where some of your work could be found? Because it's not just rhymes and mandalas, there's even more. So please.
Yeah, I right now my website is Maja.love. That's Maja.love. And I'm in my process of finding what it is that I specifically, how I serve. But for now, I serve through just a lot of different creative gifts and some different models and things that I've outlined. But yeah, please visit my website and enjoy uh, exploring different streams that you'll find there.
Fantastic. So yeah, go do that, and Maya, I hope we'll get to do more of that.
I look forward to more conversations.